My name is Rachel. I'm not one of those people who smashed plates or threw tantrums. I just watched silently as my younger sister received all the love, support, and resources, while I was left with empty chairs in the front row at weddings. For a long time, I believed that if I became good enough, smart enough, calm enough, I would be noticed. But the real turning point came when I realized that the problem wasn't me. The problem was the facade they were so attached to. And when I refused to play by their rules, the truth did the rest. I learned to disappear early. Around the age of 6, I think. That was when my mother started telling me, "Rachel, let Emily speak. She's still little." Emily was little. But even then, her voice was louder than mine. I was asked to let her try first, not to interfere, to be a good big sister. And I tried. I really tried to be good. Alina always knew how to do everything. She seemed to be made to shine. Wherever she went, attention blossomed around her like sunflowers turning toward the sun. She hadn't even learned to speak properly yet, but she already knew all the letters. From first grade, she won every competition: spelling, science, talent. All her teachers admired her, and her parents took her certificates to work in frames. In high school, she became class president, debate team captain, valedictorian, and, of course, prom queen. Tall, slender, with regular features, she decided to try her hand at television while still in college, although she was also pursuing a degree in marketing. I remember that evening well. My parents threw a party at our house and invited all our relatives and half of her university friends. In the center of the living room was a new frame with her portrait, proudly displayed in the most prominent place. It still hangs there today. It is the only photo in our home. There are no drawings I made as a child, no photos from school trips. Only Alina, in a white jacket, looking straight ahead, toward the future that was already hers. Emily was a magnet. She always attracted attention. Even strangers on the street would stop to say how cute she was, how bright, how she was such a real star. She loved it. She had a smile that lit up all 32 teeth. Her eyes were large and confident. Her gestures were quick and decisive. I stood next to her. Often a little apart. Mom called Emily my little fire flower. Me, our smart one. It was meant to be a compliment, I think. But even at 6, I felt that smart was something cold. Rational. Without sparkle. In elementary school, Emily performed in every school concert, was the MC at morning assemblies, and brought home certificates for best smile and stage presence. All the teachers knew her name. I wrote short stories in my 3-line notebook and did math problems faster than my classmates. But my mom would say, "Emily's going to be on stage again. We need to help her pick out a dress." We picked out dresses. Hundreds of dresses. At one point, I asked my dad, "Have you ever been to my math competition?" He didn't look up from his phone. "Mom and I are very busy, sweetie. You know, your sister is on live TV right now." I'm also shorter than Emily. And fatter. My mom's favorite topic. She always said it casually, as if in passing. Alina never had a weight problem. Or, "You could look as good as your sister if you tried a little harder." And so, against my will, I was enrolled in fitness classes, put on yet another diet, had sweets hidden from me, and taken to the endocrinologist just to check. My appearance was always a project for my mom, something she wanted to improve. But I just wanted to be seen, not as the other one, not Alina, but as myself. Emily grew up and seemed to fill the entire space of the house, like light that leaves no room for shadows. Her room was white, spacious, with a large mirror and a set of professional cosmetics before she even turned 13. Mine was functional. A bed, a bookshelf, a desk lamp. No picture frames. No garlands. No color. Emily received gifts for her emotional impact after the broadcast. I received silence. When I got an A+ on my final computer science project in 10th grade, my mom just said, Good. By the way, Emily is hosting the school podcast tomorrow. We need to pick out an outfit for her. It became normal. Her victories were fireworks. Mine were statistics. My parents never said they loved me less. They never said it out loud. But their actions made it clear. Emily was their celebration. I was the background music. Emily enrolled in a media communications college in California when she was 18. Her video with her admission essay went viral on TikTok, and a week later she was being interviewed by local news about the power of women's voices in new media. Meanwhile, I was studying computer science at Michigan State University. No cameras. No hype. Just books, code, presentations, and supporting student startups. It was a quiet life. But it was mine. Emily started hosting a morning show on a youth online channel in her sophomore year. In that studio, where she read headlines from a teleprompter, she looked more professional than some anchors on national television. And her parents were over the moon. They threw a party when her show made it to the main platform. There was fruit on sticks, a photo booth, friends from church. Mom hung a new portrait of Emily, smiling, in a red jacket, with a microphone and the show's logo in the background, above the fireplace. It still hangs there. It's the only photo in the house. I used to try to catch up with Emily. I tried to get involved in student government, agreed to give presentations, signed up for improv classes. But I looked like a guest at my own life. I was never her. I was Rachel. You can learn not to react. But that doesn't mean the wounds go away. It's just that over time you learn to hide how much it hurts. By my last year of high school, I was an expert at smile and shut up. My mom's passive comments about my weight, my hair, or the way I talked became a familiar background noise that no one else heard but me. Emily always looks fresher. Maybe you should spend less time on the computer and go for more walks? I learned to nod, keep quiet, and not argue. But every little jab left micro cracks. And they slowly, almost imperceptibly, eroded the ground beneath my feet. I was the older one. And I got used to what was expected of me, not less, no. Just different. I had to be smart, calm, not cause any trouble. I had to understand when the choice always fell on Emily. And when she won, it was our achievement. And when I succeeded at something, it was just luck. At some point, I got tired of proving that I deserved love. I tried everything, courses my mother recommended, student clubs she praised, even a few photo shoots, because once she said, "Maybe you should try a modeling casting? It will at least give you some confidence." The experience was humiliating. And funny, to be honest, I was simply asked to leave the line. Emily joked that my moment of fame lasted less than a shampoo commercial. She didn't mean to hurt my feelings. It was just the norm. I realized that I had only one path, the one I would forge myself. And I followed it. I decided to create a life where my voice would be heard. No applause, no spotlight, no admiration from strangers. Just me. After graduation, I moved to Portland and got a job at a small but progressive IT company that developed software for private clinics. I was valued, not for my looks or my voice, but for how I solved problems. It was a new feeling, to be needed for who you really are. I started a blog about women in tech. I began teaching at a university. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And that was enough. I kept in touch with my family, just enough to avoid conflict. Christmas dinners. Easter greetings. Occasional short phone calls. All these moments boiled down to one thing: listening to Emily. Can you believe Emily now hosts a morning show called Women in Business on a national channel? They invited her to TEDx, can you imagine? Our Emily. I nodded. I smiled. I learned not to take offense. They just didn't see me. And probably never had. My mom sometimes wrote me advice. Try Pilates, maybe it will help you concentrate. Emily goes, it helps her. Or, Your clothes in the photo are a little serious. Emily could help you with your color palette. I didn't respond anymore. I politely ignored them. With each passing day, the distance between us became not only geographical, but also emotional. I knew I wasn't their daughter, I was just a backdrop to their perfect family image. Communication with my parents became perfunctory, holiday dinners, short phone calls, cards. I didn't open up to them. They didn't ask. It was convenient for them to talk about Emily, her new contract, her trip to Spain, her article in the magazine. God, how wonderful we have such a daughter. My mother would say, raising her glass. She didn't even look in my direction. I learned not to wait. But sometimes something buzzed inside me. Especially when I remembered that I was also a daughter. I met Owen in the most ordinary of everyday situations, at a coffee stand at a tech conference. I wasn't there for inspiration. Just work, demonstrating a new API interface for clinical accounting. That day, I was invisible again, cardigan, backpack, no frills badge. If you're getting lavender syrup, don't skimp on the milk, someone behind me said. I turned around. He was wearing a sweater with a Women in Tech Support logo and a smile that was genuine, not polite. It's not every day someone saves you from disappointment in a drink, I joked. It was our first conversation. And, unexpectedly, not our last. Owen turned out to be an artificial intelligence developer in the medical field. His company was creating programs for patients with speech impairments. He didn't have TikTok, didn't post stories every hour, didn't invite me to loud parties. Instead, we had long conversations about books, Python memes, and weekly calls that started with "I'll just be a minute" and lasted for hours. 3 months later, we were sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Portland when he said, "You're not like any other girl I've been with. And that's my favorite thing about you." I was taken aback. No one had ever said that to me in such a kind way. There were no buts or "you need to change" undertones. I knew it wasn't going to be a quick romance. We were both slow, cautious, intelligent. But every conversation made me feel like, for the first time in my life, I was being seen, the real me, without demands or comparisons. A year later, we moved in together. The furniture was from Craigslist, the kitchen was small but cozy. Instead of pictures, we hung printouts of memes, old movie posters, and a schedule of sprint meetups written in marker on the fridge. Owen never asked me to be lighter, happier, or more feminine. He loved my sarcasm. My favorite skinny jeans. The way I could sit in a cafe and just enjoy myself, and it wasn't weird. I love it when you're quiet. It's the warmest silence I know, he said once. 3 years later, on a normal evening, as we were eating Chinese food out of boxes and watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he took out a small box. I don't have a script. I don't have the perfect words either. But I know I don't want to share my life with anyone else. Will you marry me? I didn't cry. I just smiled, long, truly. And I said yes. At that moment, I didn't think it was not according to plan. But Emily, and my mom, had their own plans. We called our parents that evening. Video call. I was in the background again, a small window on the screen, my dad sitting silently, my mom squinting. Are you sure? This is unexpected. Emily just started a new season of her show. She has a busy schedule. You weren't waiting to get married until. We decided to get married next spring, I replied. My mom sighed. Okay. But you understand, this is an important moment. You need to look dignified. Maybe you should see a coach? Emily knows a woman who has a very effective program. I was silent. As always. At our engagement party, they sat apart. Most of the guests were our friends from work, the book club, and a volunteer project. Everyone was genuinely happy. Mom and Dad stared at their phones. Later, Owen said he heard Mom whispering into her phone. Does she even realize that Emily was supposed to be first? That wasn't part of the plan. Emily was in tears. I was in the shadows. Again. The following weeks were the hardest in terms of planning. When I shared my idea of a forest wedding with my mom, a small ceremony, live music, wooden benches, fairy lights, she just shrugged. Well, if you like it. But Emily wanted something with balconies and a classic white tent. Emily wasn't engaged. But she had 11 Pinterest boards with wedding ideas, which my mom carefully kept in a separate folder called Emily's Big Day. When I chose my dress, simple, elegant, no embroidery, with open shoulders, my mom said, "Well, practical. And, in principle, it doesn't emphasize the belly. And it's not as bad as I was afraid it would be." I stood alone in the salon. Owen was the only one who said to me, "This is the perfect dress. Because you are in it." Emily, by the way, didn't call me after the engagement news. She didn't write anything. A few weeks later, she posted a photo from the beach on her story. Manifesting that perfect proposal vibe ring sparkles. And I realized, she sees this as a competition that isn't playing by the rules. But I wasn't playing by their rules anymore. I was choosing myself. I chose Owen. I chose, finally, to be Rachel. Not Emily number 2. Not the one who's not quite right. Just to be. I chose a dress without pretension, a soft A-line, off the shoulder, in a light champagne color. In it, I felt like, not a princess. Not a queen. Just myself. Rachel, but in the center. Finally. I chose it with Meryl, my new friend. She had her own shop for wedding and holiday decorations. She had very good taste. She supported me in everything. We shared our new achievements and successes with each other, but also when we were sad. I felt her support, and never once did I feel competition, as I did with my sister. We spent that day together, laughing, drinking lemonade in the fitting room, arguing about the veil. "You're the friend I never had," she said as we sat on a bench with a bag of cheeseburgers and sore feet. "And I'm so glad you asked me to help you prepare for your wedding." We did all the preparations from scratch. Owen and I sat in the evenings with laptops, spreadsheets, and seating charts. Meryl helped with the flowers and organizing the bachelorette party at her parents' cottage, decorating the garden with lanterns and setting the table with our favorite cupcakes, which we had baked with our closest friends the day before. My parents were silent. We sent out electronic invitations with red receipts. They included a map, a description of the ceremony, and an RSVP form. 2 weeks later, there was no response. I checked my messages, they were marked seen. I sent paper invitations by mail again. Everything was beautiful, personalized cards, gold initials, a stamp with our wedding symbol. I kept a copy of each envelope. Again, silence. I wrote, called, sent emails. The replies were short. "Very busy, we'll figure it out. We need to check our schedule. We don't know yet if we can make it." I tried not to think about it. The wedding was approaching, and the planning took up every free minute. Owen held my hand during every stressful moment, when the cake didn't arrive, when the waiter changed, when the makeup artist got sick. And he always reminded me, "You're not alone. You have us. And it's your wedding. Not theirs." The bachelorette party was like a dream. Warm, sincere, light. We drank cold cider, sang along to the ukulele, and told stories that would make even experienced screenwriters blush. But there was one thing that no one mentioned: where was my family? Everyone knew. But no one asked. And that was the best form of support. The wedding day was clear. The sun shone through the leaves, the scent of jasmine filled the air, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. We held the ceremony in the garden, without a big stage. Just our loved ones, violin music, chairs with white ribbons, and a wooden arch that Owen had made himself. He stood next to her, looking so serious in his light gray suit, his hand trembling slightly. I walked slowly. Everyone stood up. Everyone except for the 2 empty chairs in the front row. they were reserved. We signed the signs, Mom and Dad. And everyone who passed by them paused for a moment. Not with condemnation. With regret. I tried not to look that way. But when we danced our first dance, I felt that empty space so strongly that I almost stumbled. And then came the moment I feared most. The parent dance. The music started. I stood alone. Some thought my father was late. Some thought I had changed my mind. But in reality, I just stood there. Because there was no one to dance with. I left the dance floor. Owen's father came up to me and hugged me, without saying a word. And then he said quietly, "Can I be your father for just one dance?" And we went out. He spun me around, and I closed my eyes. And for the first time I didn't feel lonely. After the wedding, we went to Colorado for a week of silence, forests, lakes, and cocoa in a wooden cabin. There, I was Rachel, without the shadows of my family. Just a woman who said yes to the man who saw her. But when we returned, I knew I couldn't live peacefully without an answer. I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring. I said hello. She didn't answer. Then she said, "We were waiting for an invitation. You didn't even send us a proper invitation, and you could have come yourself and invited us in person." At first, I didn't understand. We sent both an electronic and a paper invitation. I have the confirmation. You opened the email, I said quietly. I called you and we talked about it. No. That's not serious. We wanted to be part of the preparations. I dreamed of helping with my daughter's wedding. And you just did everything yourself. You pushed us away. I was silent. Then I said, "I asked you to join us. You didn't respond. You turned away. You just didn't come." She didn't argue. But she didn't apologize either. Finally, I said, "Okay. If that's all, I'm going to end this call." "Think about yourself, Rachel," were her last words. That night, Owen sat with me in the kitchen. In the dark. "I know you're still looking for their love. But maybe it's time to realize that it's not there." I nodded. For the first time, without pain. Because on the day they didn't come, I finally saw that it wasn't about me. It was about them. And in that was freedom. The wedding was supposed to be a new beginning. A symbol of love, freedom, and the path I had chosen. But for my parents, it was just another disruption of their plan. Another proof that Rachel had stepped out of line again, at the wrong time, in the wrong way, with the wrong person. Owen didn't tell me about it before the wedding, but even then he saw more than I did. "It was never you. It was always her. Emily," he said once when we were looking at our wedding photos. "They don't like that you got married first. They see your story as a threat to theirs." I just nodded then. Because I already felt it in my skin. Like something familiar and long-standing. It hurt me not so much that they weren't there on my wedding day, but that I realized I had never been a wanted part of their vision of life. And now it was obvious to more than just me. A few weeks after the wedding, I started getting strange messages from relatives. Several aunts and cousins wrote, "We didn't know things were so bad between you. To be honest, after this, I don't want to go to Emily's engagement party." I was surprised. But not completely surprised. Emily had recently announced her engagement to a man she had been dating for just over a year. Our parents immediately pulled out all the stops. Premium locations. Dresses from designer salons. A photo shoot from the proposal to the honeymoon. Mom took Emily to private fittings, chose table settings with her, and saved 20 options for the wedding menu. All the things I was never offered. I saw the stories, happiness, filters, shadows of those who weren't there. Me. Meanwhile, relatives began to refuse to attend Emily's wedding. "We don't support how they treated you," one cousin told me. "This isn't family drama, it's blatant injustice," wrote another. Mom and Dad noticed. They contacted me, for the first time since we spoke after the wedding. Their message was short and cold. You're trying to ruin your sister's wedding. This is extremely selfish. Then the calls started. First my mom, then both of them. People are refusing to come because of you. Because of your stories. You're taking your emotions out on your relatives because you're jealous of Emily. You want her day to be ruined just like you ruined yours. I listened. And for the first time I didn't interrupt. Then I said. You're right. I'm jealous. But not of Emily. Not of her job. Not of her looks. I'm jealous of the love you gave her. Unconditional. Unwavering. The kind I never got. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then my mother started talking, quickly, irritably. That's an exaggeration. We've always loved you both. We just, Emily needed more support because of her public life. I didn't stop. You canceled my dinner after prom because Emily had an important call from the agency where she was modeling and walking in a fashion show. Her prom dress cost more than all my textbooks for the year. You weren't at my wedding. Emily wasn't even engaged at the time, but you were already planning her day. And I stood at the altar alone. Dad interrupted. Those are trivial things. They're just memories that you're exaggerating. They're not trivial. They're my life. I broke down. Everything I had held back for years came pouring out. I remembered everything, the birthdays they forgot, the public praise for Emily, the belittling of my achievements, the coldness behind the phrase, well, she's just like that. I wasn't silent anymore. But they didn't listen. If you had problems, Dad said, why didn't you say something? We would have talked it out. I tried. You didn't listen. This is unfair to us, Rachel. You're just bitter. I'm tired. Tired of always being not good enough. Mom then said the words that closed the door for good. We never thought you would stoop so low as to ruin your sister's wedding. But we always knew you were insecure because of her success. And I realized they weren't listening to me. They never had. They don't see my feelings as real. They don't care about my pain, only their public image. They care about Emily. Their Emily. Their image of the family. Their ideal. I don't want to be part of this charade anymore, I said calmly. If my feelings are just a fabrication to you, if the truth about my childhood is slander, if the only thing you care about is Emily's day and how you look to others, then we need to be honest. You're not my family. You're my experience. After a long pause, Dad said. Maybe we should stop pretending we're bad parents. You're not pretending. You just don't want to admit that you were. And that I survived, despite everything. That was the last conversation I had with them. I will no longer defend myself. I will not explain. I will simply no longer play a game where my emotions are superfluous. I choose a different life. Not because it is free of pain, but because it contains truth. And it contains love, genuine, unconditional love from those who see me for who I am. Maybe you just couldn't stand not being the center of attention. The final blow. The last line from my mother, spoken not with anger, but with the weary indulgence reserved for those who have been written off. Rachel, we've always tried to treat you both fairly. If you've decided to make yourself a victim, that's your choice, not ours. And everything fell into place. Everything I had said, about being ignored, about the coldness, about their selective love, they had confirmed with their unwillingness to take even a shred of responsibility. I didn't argue. I just said. Okay. Goodbye. And I hung up. There were no tears. At least, not the kind of tears that tear you apart, like they did when I was 14, 18, 22. Now they were tears of cleansing. Relief. I said everything I never had the courage to say before. I had nothing left inside me, and that freed me. In the evening, I sat on the porch. The dry air clung to my skin, the horizon was hazy pink. Owen came out silently, sat down next to me without asking anything. He just took my hand. And we just looked into the distance. After a while, I said, "They'll never change, will they?" "No," he replied. "But you've changed. And that's what matters." That conversation cut the last thread that kept me dependent. The little girl who was trying to win love was gone. In her place stood me, a woman who didn't need approval to know her worth. Yes, accepting that my parents will never be who I dreamed they would be hurts. But it hurt much more to wait for them to change. For the first time in my life, I felt nothing when I thought about Emily's wedding, the family drama, the family image they had so jealously built. It's not about me anymore. But 3 days later, Emily entered the game. She sent me a message. A long one. Perfectly formatted. With wisdom and a hint of contempt. "What you said to our parents was completely unacceptable. They have supported us both our whole lives. Blaming them is a sign that you simply cannot accept your decisions and take responsibility for them." Emily is skilled at passive-aggressive writing. It is her superpower. Behind every "I understand your emotions" lies, "but it's your fault." And then, of course, the continuation. "I understand that your wedding wasn't what you imagined. But that doesn't mean you have the right to ruin mine. Not everything has to be a competition, Rachel." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't know what to say. But because I had finally learned not to feed the monster that thrives on attention. Emily always abused dialogue. I used to think it was sister tension. Now I realized it was manipulation. I just blocked her number. But Emily wasn't one to accept silence. A few hours later, Owen called me from work, laughing hysterically. "Your sister found my number. And she sent me a 9-paragraph message about our dynamic." At first, I was confused. "What?" "She tried to convince me to influence you because I'm the only one who's there for her right now." Rachel, it was like a panic-stricken HR letter from the CEO. We opened her message together at home. And for the first time, I laughed, not out of pain or self-irony, but sincerely. Emily started off professionally. As Rachel's sister and someone who cares deeply about our family. And then she descended into attempts to influence me. Please help Rachel see the bigger picture. She is very sensitive, and that prevents her from understanding complex family structures. And the best part? Your supportive family ties with such successful family members as myself could be beneficial to you as well. Rachel's attitude is only hurting both of you." Owen looked at me. "Does she really think I'm interested in investing in her as a social asset? She doesn't know you at all." Emily missed the point. Her strategy is old. She tried the same thing in school, convincing my friends that I was toxic because I didn't go to the school concert she was hosting. She always made it a choice, either with her or against her. Now I see that it's not rivalry. It's her defense mechanism. Her need to dominate is a need to prove that she is the only one worthy of love. But I no longer fall into that trap. A few years ago, I would have cried and written explanations. Today, I just laugh. I won't let anyone hang their anxiety, jealousy, or fear of losing status around my neck anymore. And for the first time I realized. I am truly free. Emily had always been convinced that if she spoke louder, others wouldn't dare to disagree. She was so used to being in control. Creating stories. Correcting reality. So when Owen responded to her cryptic message without a hint of drama, she was stunned. "Thank you for your concern for Rachel's well-being. As her husband, I am focused on supporting her happiness, not regulating her behavior. If you have any concerns, please address them directly to her. Have a good day." Emily was silent for several hours. Then she sent another message. Her last one. "I see she's already poisoned you too. Don't say I didn't warn you when everything blows up." We reread it together that evening, over wine, in our pajamas, under a blanket, laughing. I said, She's still playing the same role, isn't she? Owen nodded. She's still convinced she can dictate how things should be. But she's forgotten one thing: we're not playing her script anymore. The absurdity of her appeal to my husband, her tone, her idea of social capital, none of it hurt me. On the contrary. It proved that I was no longer under the spell of her game. Once, I would have defended myself. Made excuses. Apologized. Now, I just laughed. And planned a weekend trip with Owen. We chose a small town by the ocean, with a cheap hotel and pizza on the beach. And for the first time in many years, I felt that life wasn't fighting me, but embracing me. Meanwhile, my family didn't give up. I found out from my cousin that my parents had launched a damage control campaign. They called each of our relatives separately, trying to set the record straight, as they called it. In essence, they were trying to change the narrative. Rachel is making things up because she's jealous of Emily's wedding. We didn't actually receive an invitation. She deliberately left us out of the picture to make herself look like a victim. My mom must have forgotten that I had proof. Both the email and the postal delivery tracking. And that they've lived at the same address for over 20 years. And that they've been using the same email address since the days of Yahoo. It's funny how dirty excuses come pouring out when the truth is so simple. But that's not the most interesting part. It's the family's reaction. Not everyone believed them. Many distanced themselves silently. But there were also those who called me personally. "You know, I was at your cousin's wedding," Aunt June said. "And your mother ruined her day too, because she wouldn't let Emily sit in the center. This isn't new, Rachel." And then she added, "I saw how they treated you. And I kept quiet. I'm sorry." And in those words, "I kept quiet, I'm sorry," there was more love than I had ever heard from my parents. The more I learned, the clearer the picture became. Emily's wedding plans were falling apart. Several important relatives had declined to attend. One of the partners who was supposed to provide dresses from a designer house had suddenly changed priorities. Even the wedding planner had pulled out of the project, citing an unhealthy atmosphere. I did nothing. I just kept quiet. The truth did everything for me. At a family gathering, without us, of course, someone carelessly asked my mother, "Show us the photos from Rachel's wedding." According to the same aunt, my mother exploded. She started saying that I had changed after marriage, that I had ruined family ties, that I was destructive and insidious. It wasn't hurtful anymore. It was panic. The facade was cracking, and there was nothing behind it. And that's when I said it out loud for the first time. Owen was sitting across from me at breakfast. "I don't want to have anything to do with them anymore. Not Emily. Not my parents." He looked me in the eyes. Calmly, without shock. "I know. And I support you. Completely." I smiled. And I felt that I was telling the truth, not just to him, but to myself. I'm not afraid of losing them anymore. Because they were never a real support. I finally understood that real family isn't blood. It's the people who stay when you break. And those who don't break you just because they can. Emily, with all her power, connections, and ratings, couldn't break me or my husband. And that was the biggest turning point. Because before, I thought fighting was the only option. Now I know that not fighting is also strength. True success is not a nice photo, a fancy wedding arch, or labels on champagne bottles. True success is peace of mind. And love by your side. And air that no longer smells like fear. The most ironic thing is that everything my parents were so afraid of, they created themselves. For years, they carefully built a facade. Smiles and photos. Staged dinners. Emily at the center of the system. And me, like a shadow that couldn't be shown. They convinced themselves that this was love. Harmony. "Our family is like a picture," my mother used to say. But every new step they took in recent months didn't save the facade, it cracked it even more. The more they justified themselves, the more they exposed the truth. The more they tried to paint me as the bad daughter, the louder the silence became from those who could no longer ignore it. Uncle Ben, my father's brother, had always kept his distance. His favorite phrase was, "I don't get involved so I don't complicate things." But after everything that happened, he wrote to me himself. "Rachel, I'm ashamed that I didn't say anything earlier. I saw how they treated you. I just didn't want any arguments. But now I see that silence was part of the problem." He and his family decided not to attend Emily's wedding. It was a turning point. Because it was people like him who had kept our family stable for so many years, with their silence. And now, the silence is over. I didn't respond. And I wasn't going to. Because I don't need to prove anything anymore. The truth comes out on its own. Without shouting. Without speeches. It just works. When my parents try to explain why they didn't come to my wedding, they only reveal more about who they are. When Emily sends explanatory messages to family chats, she only demonstrates how immature her need for control is. I remain silent. And that silence speaks louder than all their speeches. "You know," Owen said as we sat on the roof of our house with cups of cocoa. "They spent years building the facade. But inside, it was empty. And every board was someone's suppressed emotion. Especially yours. And now? And now it's all falling apart. And you know what? It's fair. I'm not trying to earn their approval anymore. I'm not living under surveillance, like I'm a character who doesn't fit the script." Emily always said, "Don't make a scene. Don't overreact. Don't ruin the picture." But what if the picture was wrong to begin with? I'm not appeasing her or mom or myself anymore. I don't regulate anyone's emotions, especially those they've chosen not to control themselves. And you know what? It's peaceful. It's calm. My relationship with my parents is over. I don't write to them. I don't follow them. I don't tell them where I went on vacation. I don't expect calls on Christmas. And I don't try to come up with reasons why they didn't call. My life no longer revolves around their absence. Because now I choose presence. My relationship with Emily is also over. Her last Instagram post was, as always, flawless. Every story has two sides. I choose the light. I just smiled. Because light isn't a pose. It's a process. And Emily is still playing to the crowd, even when the stage has long been empty. The most valuable thing I got out of this story is the feeling that I don't owe anyone anything anymore. I'm not responsible for being the right daughter. I'm not responsible for proving that I deserve dignity. I'm not responsible for keeping myself within their comfort zone. Owen says that sometimes the best form of revenge is to live well. But not for show. For yourself. And I agree. Strangely enough, I didn't get the most support from my family. It came from people who came into my life later. From colleagues who said, "We've seen how you've grown this year." From friends who came to my wedding even though they didn't get an invitation with a coat of arms. From you, strangers who read, listened, and supported me. Sometimes, to see what a real family can be, you have to look beyond blood. Look and see that true closeness does not require genetics. It is in empathy. In respect. In the simple words, I believe you. I am no longer afraid. I no longer want to prove anything. I just live. And if this is the end of my story, then it is exactly as it should be. Not perfect. But real.